This literally proves that car manufacturers are not listening to car buyers. Good morning, my savory seeds of sunshine. Today we want to talk about what's going on in the market trends of the automotive industry and why a lot of customers are not getting on. They're fixing what they've had, they're fixing what they have, they're looking in the old classifieds, finding 10, 15, 20-year-old vehicles, fixing those up and continually extending the life of the older vehicles because of the sheer complexity. Now we talk about what's been going on in the market, and while there's a lot of early adopters in vehicles like Tesla, obviously we're seeing that. A year ago, Q1 of 2023, and we're seeing people were buying Teslas at an alarming record. Sales were on the upswing. As a matter of fact, Tesla themselves owned about 62% of the EV market share. Now that has been dwindling because of a lot of the competition's been stepping up, generating their own types of infrastructure, their own types of vehicles, and giving customers different ideas, different competition, as well as just a different concept. So Tesla's been hard at work, just kind of trying to rejuvenate, come up with new ideas, new performance levels, new incentives, and they've been trying to price slash to get people to continually buy. But even with these increased price hacks, as well as all these other innovators coming to the table with EVs, less and less and less people are buying electric vehicles. But that conversation just doesn't stop there. A year goes by is a long time in this industry, and especially in the technology industry, which Tesla is largely a big part of. People are starting to realize it doesn't necessarily meet all their needs. And while the early adopters got on board, and most of those would even say, studies have shown that the vast majority of them, somewhere in that 70 to 80% of current Tesla owners would definitely buy another one. There's definitely a high level of owner satisfaction. The sheer reality is most of those folks are just basically done. They've got their vehicle. They're good for the next 5 to 10 years unless they trade up. And the early adopters, which those are pretty much the only folks getting on the wagon. That leaves the mass majority of the rest of the population who now finds themselves in a position of, yeah, no, that's not for me. I need to travel long distances. That doesn't work. This stop and go, these charging stations I hear so much about, the expensive battery and technology, the weight of the vehicles, the excessive tire consumption, as well as higher insurance rates means that it's just not the right car for me. But it doesn't begin and end there. Obviously, we're talking about hydrogen. And there's two main competitors, Hyundai and Toyota, both bring products to the table. But sales have tanked and slumped in this last quarter. 2024 shows that they're about 70% down in popularity in sales since the year before. That's right, the Toyota Mirai is down about 74% and the Hyundai Nexo is down about 22%. A big part of that has to do with we still can't get proper containment for hydrogen. The worst part is California, one of the biggest supporters of hydrogen fuel stations, is starting to shut down and curtail the opportunities to even fuel up. And that basically means you've got these orphaned vehicles out here that have nowhere to charge. It just doesn't make sense. Now, the target to zero emissions all makes sense. It's great and wonderful if it works, but people still have to get around. They need transportation, get the kids from school, and just make their way about through life. And obviously, hydrogen just doesn't cut the bill. There's way too many uphill battles, and even beyond the electrification world, hydrogen seems to suffer a much bigger uphill climb. But then we talk about even internal combustion vehicles. Now, the good old-fashioned pickup trucks we speak so much of. People are missing the old days of the V8s. Now, Chevy, people are often saying to me, it's all for emissions. That's why, Ram's going down to a Turbo 6 and giving up their 5.7 Hemi. A lot of customers are not going to love that. I warn you right now. And as well, their Challengers and Chargers going pure EV and giving up the good old Hellcats and those great big supercharged V8 engines are waving bye-bye by the dodo bird. A lot of customers are just going to reject these vehicles. And it's showing. Electric vehicle sales are slumping. Hydrogen sales are slumping. And even people don't have a lot of great things to say about hauling around heavy loads in their pickup truck with a 6-cylinder engine. Obviously, the base model Rams are currently using their 3.6, but they're going to be revving up and utilizing this Turbo Hurricane engine in replacement of the 5.7. People are absolutely decimated by that because people who use a truck need it for work and they want low revving, high torque, long-wearing, long-lasting drivetrains. Turbocharged engines bring heat. Yes, they improve performance and efficiency, and they're great for the racetrack. But when you want a vehicle to run 300,000 or 400,000 miles and pull your boat every weekend or haul that load of concrete, rarely can you rely on a vehicle that's highly strung with a drivetrain like a turbocharged engine that has the performance, but it just brings all this heat under the engine where you don't want it. And that just takes a toll on plastics, electrics, valve cover gaskets, you name it. Problems start evolving that you never had 10 years before. So a lot of people already had a hard time accepting the Ford, obviously with the EcoBoost. EcoBoost came out. They've proven themselves. They've had their share of issues. They've dropped valves. They've had carbon fouling, turbocharging, wastegate issues, and they've certainly had their share of troubles, and Fords still managed to sell a lot of vehicles, but not with a lot of battles behind them. Now Chevy's one of the outliers, and they're still rocking a good old-fashioned 5.3 and 6.2, but sadly, even their tried and true engines like those two are having a lot of engine troubles. Yes, they're having lifter issues, rocker problems, and of course just general reliability. Transmission issues nonetheless. And although they've absolutely dabbled slightly here with a recent turbo 6-cylinder engine, they know that that's not one of their best sellers. So what are customers looking for, and why are builders not making them? Well, customers, the way I see this, most customers I speak to, and even if forget about the pickup trucks, if you're even talking about cars, why do you think Toyota held on for so long and stuck with their tried and true 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, no turbos? What about their 3.5 liter V6 engine, no turbos? They kept those engines forever. And what about their good old-fashioned 5.7 liter V8 engine that they put in the Sequoias, they put in some Lexus vehicles, and they put in the Tundra? They all went bye-bye. They had to. Strict emission standards are aggressively pushing a lot of these OEMs and these manufacturers to create drivetrains that show better emissions regulation, or that adhere to the regulations, show better emission standards and results. Obviously at the tailpipe, it's a very, very, very important time. Emissions, we don't want pollution in the air, but I've got to believe that a lot of these manufacturers can find ways to clean the products, to clean the good old-fashioned V8 engines, the V6 engines. But instead what they're doing is, look what we're seeing in Mercedes-Benz. They have that AMG C63S. Remember back a few years ago, you had the C63 was a 6.2 liter naturally aspirated, large displacement, big torquey V8 engine. Then they switched to a smaller twin turbo 4 liter V8 engine that made more performance. It was a better drivetrain. But a lot of people were like, well, it still says C63, but it's a 4.0. How does that make sense? And now recently they tossed all those V8 engines and now they replaced it with a hybrid pushing a small little 2 liter turbocharged high-strung 4-cylinder engine. Those are not selling. Customers do not want them. Customers probably aren't going to love the new Ram, but if they want Dodge, that's probably where the way they're going to have to go. It's going to be a lot like Ford. They're losing their options. Even Toyota, they waved bye-bye to that 5.7. In comes that twin turbo V6. We spoke of this last week. And while they're not necessarily the best option, we know that Toyota has had that tried and true V8 for many, many years. That's good for 300,000 or 400,000 or 500,000 miles. Why on God's green earth would they ever try to change that? They know when they've got a recipe for success that they just stick with it because people flock to reliability. Some people just want that reliable drivetrain. That's why Toyota, Lexus have always maintained that reliable stature. Things are changing a little bit. It's one of those situations where customers still want, a lot of people I'm talking to want a good, reliable, less instrumentation, less gauges, simpler drivetrain, a naturally aspirated V6 or V8 if it's in a pickup truck. They want manual gearboxes, at least available for some drivers, maybe not for everybody, but certainly more of the down-to-earth, down-to-basics drivetrain. There's even been people commenting, give me crank windows. They're okay with that, and a single knob for your heating control. One volume for a fan, one knob as well for your heat temperature. But now they have dual climate controls, all these automated systems, and when you turn the car off, you hear these vents opening and closing and whooshing and pooshing. And all these different pieces of technology start to fail. You get these automated gates and these little servos and motors that start to let them down. And when they go, they start to cost thousands of dollars. And people recognize that. I personally had a BMW X5 many moons ago. then the fan heater goes, then the servos, and all these other pieces of equipment under the dash start going. Next thing you know, you're working on your head, and that's if you care to try some of that yourself. A lot of the times you just take it to the dealer and you sign the check for $4,500, move on, and Bob's your uncle. It's this added complexity that's creating problems. Look at the diesel engines. Roland Cole comes for a reason. Why do you think so many people do deletes? I mean, even with a lot of these great emission standards, yes, these brand new diesel engines are great when they're new. You go, you lick the tailpipe, it is poker straight. It's clean as a whistle, and it's beautiful. However, after about 6 or 7 or 8 years, if you're one of those long-term owners, you'll soon find the diesel exhaust fluid, the constant blue fluid, or the AdBlue you had to keep adding, or the heater tank, of course, for the DEF fluid, or the EGR valves that plug off, or all of the other emissions equipment that starts filtering, plugging off with carbon, fouling, and starts clogging up the system and ends up costing you thousands of dollars of maintenance. Of course, it all creates extra heat under the cabin, under the cab or the engine compartment, and it just creates more problems than it's worth. So all of these new emission standards are driving manufacturers to do things that they probably don't necessarily always want to do, and honestly, what a lot of car buyers don't even want to take on. So it's an interesting time as we move forward. And now we're getting to a place where people are becoming sort of not necessarily at will, but they're becoming early adopters of some level of electrification because they have no choice. You know, they can't afford a full-size pickup truck. We spoke about this. Try to buy a new Ram for $80,000 or 70 grand. How about a new Chevy for $70,000 or $80,000? How about a new Ford for 75 grand? You get the message? So now they're selling this half-pint little pickup truck called the Maverick, but it's hybrid. So a lot of people are thinking, well, that's all I need is a little truck for the odd little haul-around chore, but it's hybrid. But at least it's not electric, right? It's not pure EV. So a lot of people are looking at it now like at least hybrid is the halfway house. I don't still have to give up my flexibility, capability, driving my internal combustion engine, but I do get a little bit of the benefits over here with a little electrification. Does get me down the road, you know, in relative comfort, economy, and it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg. So now people are starting to lean a little bit more where they weren't. 5 years ago, nobody would even want a hybrid vehicle. That was shunned. Go 10 years back when it first started, it was almost a joke. People were curious, they were enticed, but there's no way in heck they'd buy one for themselves. Now we're in a place where they are starting to look at hybrid, only merely because of the fact that they don't have options. It's you either get on or get off the bus. And that's an unfortunate turn of events. Now, right now, a lot of these OEMs are saying, well, you have to get onto the emissions program. And with the emissions program, you have to take on hybrids and EVs and small engines. So then tell me, why is it that car manufacturers, Lamborghini, still rocking a V12, V10s, although they're downsizing that to a V8? Why is it then Chevy's still rocking V8 engines? What's changing there? There's still OEMs and manufacturers out there that are utilizing V8 engines. How about a lot of the European standards are even stricter than North America? Why is BMW still putting out a 4.4 liter twin turbo V8? Or of course the VAG group with that 4 liter twin turbo V8. Why are they still pushing out V8 engines when clearly the rest of the industry is pushing back? It's because that's what people want. And these OEMs are trying to hold on by the short and curlies as long as they physically can to satisfy the need and the want of the car buyers. Sadly, we have the government over here pushing down, we have environmentalists pushing down, and us as customers are just taking the brunt of this, and we're not able to buy what we want. And times are changing. Hydrogen's certainly not the answer. The infrastructure is not there, and it probably never will be. In theory, it's a great idea, absolutely, but there's just way too much infrastructure and cost, plus the volatility of the fueling just makes it an interesting conversation. Electrification, well, they've proved it out. It can work. However, there's still a lot of challenges there. Infrastructure upgrades, range, obviously is a big thing. And Toyota's trying to challenge that notion and saying, look, I think we're going to have something that's good for 1,000 miles coming up soon. But until that time, a lot of people are struggling buying electric vehicles, spending $100,000 on a Tesla, or even a $60,000, $70,000 on a Tesla when you're very much limited to range. You have to install your own charger at home, and it just becomes cost prohibitive. So what do the customers want? The customers want simple and cost effective. I hope that shares with you. I'd love to hear your comments section down below. Are you one of the early adopters? Do you want to move on? Enough with the horse and buggy and the cart? Because I hear those comments too. Or in fact, are you actually looking for something simple, effective, workhorse, no turbos, no electric, just keep it moving, bare bones, 2 gauges or even 1 gauge, a manual gearbox, and naturally aspirated engine? I'd love to hear your comments section down below. Please do share that with me. And with all of that said, be sure to check out right there. Watch out for those deal ripoffs. They're trying to hammer you on every single transaction. Watch out, 5 big tips. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.